Hello again and welcome to the Warhammer 40k Imperial Guard Tactics video. Now before we get into today's video, I would like to say a huge thank you to Christian James for sending in some awesome pictures of his Imperial Guard army. Really like the mixture of old metal models with the Praetorians and the Mordians and the Talan and the Attilas and the Stormtroopers all fighting side by side. You guys know I'm an absolute sucker for these classic metal models, and Christian, you have done a fantastic job. You have done these boys proud. So thank you for sending these pictures in. Really like some of the conversions you've done as well. Didn't want to forget to say that. Yeah, overall, fantastic pictures. Thank you for sharing them. God, that banner in the background looks good as well. I could gush over these pictures all video, but unfortunately we're going to have to move on. But yeah, thank you for sending these pictures in. If anyone else has got any cool pictures they want me to use in my videos, please post them on my Facebook page, or you can email them to me at mordianglorytv@gmail.com, and there will be a link to the Facebook page and the email address down in the description below. But without further ado, let's get on with today's video. Now today guys, I want to do a unit review and tactica for Crusaders. I'm not talking about Black Templar infantry, I'm talking about the elite infantry choice that we have in our Astra Militarum Codex. Now, for those of you that are unfamiliar with Crusaders, they are a combat melee choice for the Guard. And they are often overshadowed by Ballgrins, because Ballgrins are fantastic, don't get me wrong. Now, I'll go over the stat line for the Crusader. He's got a 6-inch movement, weapon skill 3+, ballistic skill 4+, strength 3, toughness 3, only got 1 wound, but he's got 2 attacks, leadership 7, and a 4+ save. Now, each Crusader comes with a power sword and a storm shield. Now, the storm shields have been FAQ'd. If you look in your codex, it'll say a 3+ invulnerable save. They have been FAQ'd to have a 4+ invulnerable save, but +1 to their armor save as well. So they have changed a little bit. Now, because of that change, a lot of people, including myself, have kind of, derided or dismissed Crusaders, because the traditional 8th edition tactic with these guys was when they had a 3+ invulnerable save, what you could do is then use a Psyker to cast Psychic Barrier on them and increase that to a 2+ invulnerable save, which is really, really nice. And then that meant that they made up quite an effective roadblock unit. You could, if you had something like back in the day of 8th edition, when you had things like Blood Angel Smash Captains and whatnot come flying in and they would massacre anything they touched, you throw in a Crusader squad to slow that guy down, and you will slow him down because you've got a 2+ invulnerable save on them. They also have some really interesting rules around Act of Faith as well. Now, what's really important to note is that the Crusaders in the Guard Codex are different to the Crusaders in the Sisters of Battle Codex, and ours haven't been updated yet. Now, normally when something's not updated, it's a disadvantage. But in this case, I would argue it is an advantage, because we actually get to keep using the original Acts of Faith. This is before Faith Points and anything like that with the Sisters Codex, the original Acts of Faith. And what this does is it's a really interesting special rule for you Crusaders. And it basically says, Act of Faith. Roll d6 at the start of each of your turns on a 2+1 unit from your army with this ability can perform an Act of Faith chosen from the following list. Hand of the Emperor, they can immediately move to the movement phase. Divine Guidance, it can shoot, not really a big deal when these guys I think don't even have any shooting weapons. The Passion, if the unit is within 1 inch of the enemy unit, it can immediately pile in and attack as if it were the fight phase. Very good. And probably one of the most important ones, Spirit of the Martyr, 1 model in the unit recovers D3 lost wounds, or you can return a single slain model to the unit with 1 wound remaining. Well, that basically means on a 2+, every turn you can just restore one of these guys to full, you can just bring one back from the dead, which is quite interesting. Okay, I think out of the 2 there, Hand of the Emperor, the Passion, Spirit of the Martyr, they're all really good. Gives you a bit of a toolbox for the unit. Potentially you've got an infantry unit there which can move 12 inches. Now that is useful for getting into combat. That's also pretty useful for getting onto an objective without having to use up orders to do it. So, there has definitely got some possibilities there. It's also great for move blocking people. If you're holding an objective, your Crusaders can go past it, form a shield wall, and the enemy's going to have to fight through them. There's lots of possibilities with those Acts of Faith. None of them are super strong, but all of them have got a bit, add a little bit of a toolbox take all commands element to this unit. Now, they also have a really, really good rule called Zealot. And Zealot means you can reroll failed hit rolls for a unit with this ability in a turn in which it charged, made a heroic intervention, or was charged by an enemy unit. That is really, really nice. You see, one of the issues with Ballgrins is that whilst they've got lots of attacks and whatnot, they only hit on 3s, and that's fine, but they've got no rerolls. And I can't tell you the number of times when I've had a unit of Ballgrin with an absolute boatload of attacks and they just flub it because there's no form of rerolls. And you really do notice it in a combat unit because, especially when you're facing enemy units which have access to prestigious amounts of rerolls, when you don't have them, you do notice it. So having a unit which has an inbuilt form, not just to reroll like ones, but to have full rerolls to hit, it's really, really nice. Especially now that to hit modifiers have been capped, and you don't tend to find too many to hit modifiers in combat. They do exist, but you tend to find that to hit modifiers tend to be in the shooting phase, but not always. Not always. It's definitely not a hard and fast rule. So lots of people are going to be saying, Morning Glory, why are you going on about Crusaders? Your edition out of date. What the heck are you talking about? Well, the reason I like Crusaders, and I'm certainly not arguing that they are a must-take unit, but they're definitely something you want to be aware of. Knowing your local meta and keeping an eye on the current meta with things like Orc coming back and Ghazghkull and stuff like that. There is a trend from Games Workshop to have models that can only lose a certain amount of wounds per phase. Okay, and whilst this isn't a common trend, if you're not ready for it, a single model can lose you the game. If the enemy has a model which can only lose, let's say, like Ghazghkull or the Void Dragon, which can only lose I think 3 wounds for the Void Dragon, 4 wounds for Ghazghkull a phase. If you're a traditional guard player and you've put all of your firepower, all of your points into firepower, then you are genuinely going to struggle. Especially when you start looking at Necron lists which are going to be having dual Catan, which is not an uncommon sight in the competitive scene. Okay, a lot of people deride Necrons and say they're not that competitive, but I've yet to go to an event where someone isn't running them and that person doesn't do surprisingly well. The whole codex might not be great, but there are a couple of Necron builds which are pretty good, and one of them is using Catan, and those Catan units, not only can they only lose a certain number of wounds per phase, but they can also regrow a wound a turn, which means if you only have the capability of doing damage in one phase, it will take you 4 turns to kill one of those Catan. Now bear in mind those Catan are mortal wound machines. It is not uncommon for one of those Catan to be able to put out 10 mortal wounds in a turn. Okay, and you can't afford one of those things running around just rampant. You can't afford that. So you need to have some way that you can interact with every single phase. And that's why I'm looking at Crusaders. Because they are significantly cheaper than Ballgrin. And they can give you what you need. See, the thing about Ballgrin is they're really, really good. Don't get me wrong. They're really good at punching down. So they are like, it's quite funny because they're big lovable brutes, but they are what I would term a bully unit, which means they're very good at hitting down, very good at bullying non-combat units. And, they can even barney with, I would say, sort of low-level combat units like assault intercessors and stuff like that. So they are good, and they are powerful, but based on tournament experience that I've had recently, I've started losing a little bit of favour with my Ballgrins because they do fantastically until they start coming up against something which just hard counters them. Something like Admech and Drukhari. Now these armies are super powerful, don't get me wrong, but even things like Volkite Dreadnoughts, which are super common. Every Marine list in a tournament that you're going to be coming across is going to be running 2 Volkite Dreadnoughts. It's just guaranteed. Okay, if they're not, they're doing something special, or they've not got a very good list. And the problem is that mortal wounds just shred through your Ballgrins, and you tend to find that against those 3 lists, Your Ballgrins are, if you've gone for the full Ballgrin star, they're a 400 point paperweight. And that's a problem. Because whilst those Ballgrins might perform okay or well in other games, if they're basically dragging you down against some of the best lists, you're giving yourself absolutely no chance. And that's what I found. My Ballgrin, the more 9th edition curses that are coming out, the more that my Ballgrin are suffering. But I still need the capability to be able to operate in every phase of the game. Now, operating the psychic phase is fairly easy. I can drop in a double smite Inquisitor, no problem, or I can simply take a Primaire Cycle and Ashtapath and just bang out, a smite and psychic Maelstrom a turn, or something similar. That's easy enough to cover for less than 100 points. But on the combat side of things, I don't want to be turning up to a game with a 6-man or a 9-man Ballgrin unit, and for that not to be for 1 or 2 games every tournament for them to just be useless. It's a big investment if a quarter of my army then, or a fifth of my army then, can't pull it off. So what I need from Crusaders, and what I think Crusaders are really good at doing, is they still give you that ability to handle, because it's you've got to be a take all comers army, guys. You've got to you've got to take into account that you've got a high chance of facing one of these units that only takes a certain number of wounds a phase. You're highly likely to face a Necron play. If you go into a GT, 1 in 5 of your games, there's a good chance you're going to face something like Necrons or Orcs, especially with the new Orcs. That can only take a certain number of wounds per phase. It's likely. So, or maybe you're not going to a tournament. Here, maybe, to be fair, Necrons aren't a dominant presence. Maybe factoring them in is, you're sort of factoring in too many things. I could totally be persuaded of the argument, but I do think it's important to have some presence in every phase anyway. But maybe your local meta, you've got a Necron player that you play. That's quite likely, because obviously Necrons are part of the Indomitus box set and a lot of the starter sets as well. It's not unlikely that you're going to come across a Nightbringer or a Deceiver or a Star Dragon. So the point is that it's not uncommon that you're going to face these units, and if you don't have something for them, then you're going to struggle. And this is where I think Crusaders come in over Ballgrin. Ballgrin are fantastic, but if you're finding that you're sinking 400 points into Ballgrin every game and you don't feel like you're getting 400 points back, what I'm considering and what I'm actually going to do, and I'm going to put money where my mouth is, and I'm going to take this to a tournament, is I'm going to take a unit of Crusaders, because they're half the points of Ballgrin. And I don't need to dominate in the combat phase. I just need the ability to essentially guarantee 4 wounds in assault. That's all I really need. And so I'm willing to portion off 10% of my points, for a 10-man Crusader squad with a priest. Rather than portion off 20%, I'll portion off 10% for that scenario, because I might come across it in 10% of my game, so I'll portion off 10% of my points for it. That's kind of like a way you can think about it. And if that's the case, then I need a unit that can do 4 mortal wounds, 4 wounds reliably in the assault phase. So if you look at a unit of 30 Crusaders, well, if you've got a priest of 10 Crusaders with a priest, that's 30 attacks. Hitting on 3s, well, you'll hit with 20 of them, but guess what? You've got 4 rerolls. So you're going to hit with another 6 or so. So that's 26, 27 hits. Now, if you're then wounding against a Catan, thanks to power swords being like an extra strength now, you're going to be winning on 5s rather than 6s. There may be some rules out there, -1 to wound and stuff, but you should be winning on 5s. And that means you're going to get 9 wounds through. If you get 27 hits, you're going to get 9 wounds through. Now, if your opponent's on a 4 invulnerable save, you've pretty much, the odds are in your favour that you're going to do 4 wounds to that thing in the assault phase, and that might do it. And that means in one turn, you've got this Catan flying towards you. It's a threat. You can't afford, rather than having that thing flying around damaging you for 4 turns, it flies in, it does some damage to you. You then do 3 wounds to it in the shooting phase. Your Psyker or your Inquisitor comes out, does another 3 wounds to it at the psychic phase, and then guess what? You throw your Crusaders in, and you've dealt with it. That threat has been dealt with, and it only costs you, 10% of your points. And that means between the Crusaders and the Inquisitor or the Psyker, you're looking at a total of like 260 points, and the rest of your points can go into firepower. You've basically portioned off, what's it be like 10%, 13% roughly. So, you're portioning off about 13% of your army just to make sure that if that situation comes up, you're going to be fine. And those Crusaders are not going to be useless in other games. If you're facing a serious shooting army and you don't think you're going to be able to get your Crusaders across the board, well, guess what? You can rod them. You can use them to get rod, because they don't need to advance. Rod is retrieve victorious data. It's a good secondary. So you might find that your Crusaders haven't got any good combat targets. If they try and charge out, they're going to get destroyed. Well, guess what? You can retrieve victorious data in your own table quarter, and in Warring table quarters, and then you can Hand of the Emperor, move 6 inches, and then move again another 6 inches. You could get yourself into another table quarter, and you're at the very least getting engaged, but more than likely you'll be able to do another retrieve victorious data. That's pretty good. So when I was talking about that toolbox before, they are more of a toolbox, and they have a smaller footprint, so they're easier to hide for the counterattacks and stuff than things like Ballgrin. That's why I think their role has changed. They are no longer this 2+ invulnerable save, you're never going to get past me, I'm going to regrow a guy turn unit. I wouldn't even, as crazy as it sounds, I wouldn't even bother giving them the 3+ invulnerable save for Psychic Barrier. Wouldn't even bother. I would see them purely, because when you start doing that, now you're looking at, a 250 point unit to pull something like that off. Then it starts being like, okay, then it starts getting a bit much. But I think, 9 to 10 Crusaders and a Priest, a neat little 200 point package, I think that really does fit the business. Now, hold my hands up here. This is a bit of a theory craft video, but I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. I've submitted a list to a grand tournament, 2 days, 5 games, 50 players, and which is at the end of August, and I'm taking my Scions, and instead of my Ballgrin, I am taking 10 Crusaders and a Priest, and I've committed to that. And so we will come back to this, but after that tournament I will do an after action video, and I will be able to say with confidence whether Crusaders do have a place or whether they don't. At the end of the day, guys, not to dismiss my own video in a sort of way, at the end of the day, we're playing Imperial Guard 9th edition. We haven't got our codex yet. It's tough, and we have to revisit and relook at some of these units to see if they work. What I would really appreciate is some comments down in the comment section below. If anyone who's got experience with Crusaders in 9th edition would be great. Anything that whatever you think. Also, if you've got any other sort of hidden gem units that you think would be that I should cover, please let me know. I definitely want to have another look at Scout Sentinels. I've really dismissed those for a while now, but they're a fantastic way of getting engaged on all fronts. Fantastic way, and they're not attacks if you take them in a brigade and you've got they're earning you points, 100 points to guarantee yourself a couple of victory points. It's not a bad way of looking at them. So yeah, any suggestions for other unit reviews, revisitations, stuff like that, let me know. Hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. If you have enjoyed what you've heard today, please consider heading on over to the Patreon page. There will be a link down in the description below. And of course, a huge thank you to all of my current patrons. You guys are awesome. It's thanks to my patrons that I'm able to go to tournaments, keep my finger on the pulse of the meta, and all that good stuff. So massive thank you to you guys. Anyway, hope you guys have enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching, and of course, I'll see you guys next time.